Esoteric Christianity. Half the people in the world are Christian. The other half have other religions. In my view, as a sensible man, this makes no difference. The other half are the same. Therefore, we can say that the whole world is Christian, that the difference is only in name. And the world has been Christian, not only for our current epoch, but for thousands of years. There were Christians long before the advent of Christianity. Generally speaking, our knowledge of Christianity and the form of Christian worship is very limited. In fact, we know almost nothing about the history and origin of a number of things. For example, what was the source of the church, of the ideal of a temple, where the faithful gather to attend services and participate in special rites? Most of us never think about this, or we assume that the external forms of the service, such as the rites and the singing of canticles, were invented by the church fathers, or taken partly from Greco-Roman pagan religions and partly from the Hebrews. But none of this is true. The origin of the Christian church, that is, of the Christian temple, is actually much more interesting. To begin with, the form adopted for the church and the liturgy in the first centuries of Christianity could not have been borrowed from Greco-Roman cults or from the Hebrew religion, because nothing like it existed in either of these traditions. The Jewish synagogue or holy temple and the Greek and Roman temples to various gods were something quite different from the Christian church that appeared in the 1st and 2nd centuries. The Christian church is actually a school, although this has long been forgotten. Imagine a school where the teachers give lectures and perform explanatory demonstrations without even knowing that this is what they are doing, and where the pupils, or simply visitors, think these lectures and demonstrations are nothing more than ceremonies and rituals. This is the Christian church of our time. Neither the Christian church nor its form of worship was invented by the church fathers. It was all taken, ready-made, from Egypt, although not from the historical Egypt that we are familiar with, but from one we do not know. This Egypt occupied the same place, but existed much earlier. Only small remnants of it have survived in historical times, and these have been so well preserved in secret that we do not even know where to find them. To say that this prehistoric Egypt was Christian many thousands of years before the birth of Christ is to recognize that its religion was based on the same principles and ideas that constitute true Christianity. These were special schools of repetition, where on specific days, and in some schools perhaps every day, a public recital presented in condensed form the entire course of science that could be learned at that particular school. Sometimes this recital lasted a week or even a month. Thanks to these repetitions, those who attended the course were able to maintain a lasting connection with the school and retain in their memory all they had learned. Sometimes they would travel great distances just to listen to a repetition, and when they went away they felt a renewed relation with the school. On certain special days of the year, the recitals were particularly complete and performed with particular solemnity, and these days themselves were given a symbolic meaning. It was these schools of repetition that served as a model for the Christian church. In fact, the form assumed by the Christian liturgy represents almost entirely the condensed course of the science dealing with the universe and man. All the individual prayers, hymns, and responses had their own meaning in this repetition, as did the holidays and religious symbols, although this meaning was forgotten long ago. In the practice of Christianity, a person has to learn to pray, just as he must learn everything else. Prayer can be productive if one knows how to pray and is able to concentrate in the proper way. But it must be understood that there are various kinds of prayer which yield different results. When we speak of prayer and how it can be productive, we usually have only one kind in mind, namely, petition, praying for something, or we assume that petition can be part of every other kind of prayer. This is, of course, not the case. Most prayers have nothing to do with asking for things. These are ancient prayers, many of which are much older than Christianity. They are, so to speak, recapitulations. By repeating them silently or out loud, a person endeavors to experience, both mentally and emotionally, everything contained within them. And it is always possible to make new prayers for oneself. If, for example, a person says, "I wish to be serious," the most important thing is how he says it. He can repeat it to himself 10,000 times a day, but if he is thinking about how soon he will be done and what he will have afterward for dinner, then he is not praying, just kidding himself. The same words, however, can become a prayer if a person recites them in a certain way. When he says "I," he tries at the same time to think of everything he knows about I. There is no single I, only a host of petty I's that shout and fight with one another. He wants to be the one I, the master in the allegory of the carriage horse and driver. When he says "wish," he thinks what it means to say "I wish." Is he able to wish? He experiences desires and aversions all the time, but they are not his own. It wishes, or it does not wish. He therefore strives to oppose these two impulses with his own "I wish," connected with the aims of work on himself, that is, to introduce the third force into the customary combination of the two forces. When he says "to be," the person thinks about what it means to be, what being means. There is the being of mechanical man, with whom everything is done, and the being of one who can do, and it is possible to be in different ways. What the person praying wants is not simply to be in the sense of to exist, but in the sense of attaining a certain degree of unity in himself. Thus, the words "to be" take on new weight and significance. Finally, when he says "serious," the person thinks what it means to be serious about attaining inner freedom. How he responds is very important. If he understands what this means, if he defines it correctly for himself, and feels that he truly desires it, then his prayer can be productive in the sense that it can make him stronger in his resolve. He will notice more when he is not serious about his life, and will struggle more to overcome this tendency, actually becoming more serious. In exactly the same way, a person can recite a prayer, the words "I want to remember myself." What does it mean to remember? The person must think about memory. He is struck by how little he remembers, how often he forgets what he has decided, what he has seen, what he knows. His whole life would be different if he could remember. Everything bad has come from his inability to remember. When he says "myself," again, he returns to himself. Which self does he want to remember? Is it even worth remembering his entire self? And how can he distinguish what aspects he wants to remember? These thoughts can lead to the idea of work for self-knowledge, and how to engage in it more seriously. In the Christian liturgy, there are a great many prayers just like this, where the point is to reflect upon each word, but they lose all meaning when they are repeated or sung mechanically. Take the everyday prayer, "Lord, have mercy." What does it mean? When one recites this prayer, a person is making an appeal to God. He should therefore give some thought to it, asking himself what God is and what he is. He is asking God to have mercy upon him, but for this God first has to be aware of him, to take notice of him. But is he worth taking notice of? And if so, what in him is worth anyone's awareness? And who, then, is to be aware of him? The answer is God himself, and so forth. You see, all these thoughts, and many others, should occur to a person every time he utters this simple prayer, and then it is precisely these thoughts that could do for him what he asks God to do. But what can he hope to accomplish if his praying consists of nothing more than reciting, "Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy," over and over again like a parrot? We know full well that it will do him no good at all. There is something very wrong at the basis of our usual attitude toward religion. We need to understand that, as noted above, religion is doing. A person does not merely think his religion or feel it. Unless we live our religion to the fullest extent possible, it is not religion, just philosophy, or maybe even fantasy. Whether we like it or not, we show our attitude toward religion by our actions, and only by our actions. Therefore, if our actions are opposed to those required by a given religion, we have no right to claim that we belong to that religion. The vast majority of people who call themselves Christians not only fail to obey the precepts of their religion, but actually do not even think that they should obey them. Christianity forbids murder, and yet one of the dominant features of human progress is our technique of warfare, of killing other people. How can we call ourselves Christians? No one has the right to call himself a Christian who does not carry out Christ's precepts. We can say that we desire to be a Christian if we try to carry them out, but if we just ignore them, or scoff at them, or make up our own precepts, or simply forget about them, we have no right whatever to call ourselves Christians. War is the most striking example, but the rest of human life is exactly the same. We call ourselves Christians, but we fail to realize that we do not really want to be Christians, and even if we desired it, this would not be enough. In order to be a Christian, it is necessary not only to desire, but to be able to be one. In order to be a Christian, one must be. That is, be master of oneself. If a person is not his own master, he cannot be a Christian. He is simply a machine, an automaton, and a machine cannot be a Christian. Is it possible for an automobile to be Christian? It is simply a machine that functions mechanically, with no capacity to be responsible. To be a Christian means to be responsible. This possibility comes only when a person at least partially ceases to be a machine, when he begins, in fact, and not only in words, to desire to be a Christian. Christianity says that we should love our neighbor, that we should love all people, but this is impossible. At the same time, it is quite true that it is necessary to love. For this, one must be able. Only then can one love. Unfortunately, over time, followers came to adopt the ideal of what is to be done, to love, and lost sight of the precondition, the capacity to do, the religion that must precede it. Of course, it would be silly for God to demand from man what he cannot give, and it is not like that. Only recently have people forgotten the precondition, and it is only because they have lost the capacity that it is now impossible. Let us each ask ourselves, simply and openly, whether we can love all people. If we had had a cup of coffee, we love. If not, we do not love. How can this be called Christianity? In the past, not all people were called Christians. Some members of the same family were called Christians, others pre-Christians, still others non-Christians. So in one and the same family, there could be the first, the second, and the third. But now all call themselves Christians without justification. A Christian is a person who is able to fulfill the commandments, who is able to do all that is demanded of a Christian, both with his mind and his essence. A person who, in his mind, wishes to do all that is demanded of a Christian, but can only do so with his mind and not with his essence, is called a pre-Christian, and one who can do nothing, even with his mind, is called a non-Christian.